Yeah, so we get married, and I remember what was really frustrating is the bishop said something something to the effect of, this isn't as good. But when you get married in the temple, that's, I mean, with all my family around, and, that really angered me when he said that. But
he basically downgraded the specialness of that special day.
Yes, that really frustrated me. So, but so, and even before I go there, because I forgot to mention about my missionary.
Yeah.
And I don't know
go ahead.
how much time. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was at school, I did date a kid, and he was amazing. Friend of, we were friends first, and then we started to kind of date, and then he went on a mission to Africa. So, but he went to after. It was refreshing because, we met before he went on a mission to Africa.
Right.
He got called to Africa while we were kind of dating or talking. And so I wrote him, and, and his family, while he was on his mission, I'd go to his family's house, and they loved me. And it was kind of we were going to get together after his
mission.
Yes, mission. And so I remember the day that he told me that he was gay. And that was another thing. I know we're going back, but that's another thing that was put in. That was a big thing.
We're kind of doing the unraveling now.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so he told you he's gay.
Yeah, he told me.
After his mission?
After his mission.
Okay.
Because I think he thought that his mission would have fixed him or something. But we were dating a little bit before he told me that he was gay, and, and I kind of didn't have a feeling, but I just had this idea that there could be something going on. But his family, they all wanted us to get married, and and he is such a good person. And it was probably the first time that, as far as dating before I met my husband, that I met somebody who was just so amazing, such a good person. He didn't just date me because, it was genuine, and
he saw you.
He saw me. Yeah. It was the first time I felt like somebody saw me. And so, yeah, we dated it, but then he told me that he was. And I remember, which I'm really grateful for my upbringing, because my uncle is actually trans. So I've been, exposed to that, and it never was I'm so grateful for my family for being so inclusive and so open to all. And my mom's a therapist, so I think having a mom who's a therapist and all these things, and when it came to people who were quote unquote different, I didn't. And I'm different to some people. It wasn't a big deal to me. So when he told me that, and he was surprised, that I just was oh, okay. Just was okay.
Yeah.
But I really liked him, and I remember him saying that I was the first girl that he was ever interested in. So we were trying to see how we were going to make it work, and it wasn't really a big deal to me,
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel so bad, because I remember we would meet with a bishop and almost try to change him,
Mm-hmm.
and
repent and heal.
Yeah, to heal, so that we could get together. And
gay or lesbian or transgender is a disease.
Yeah, it was a bad thing.
A bad thing.
Yeah, and I feel so badly that I was a part of that. Because even his parents would, I remember his mom said, I looked at his journal, and he said that he and I feel like she knew, and that's why she was telling me this, that his journal, he said that he really liked you, and because I think she was hoping so much that he.
Yeah, they're any woman, any woman that will be with my son, if he's attracted or likes her, we're going to jump on that, because we don't want our gay son, heaven forbid, to be gay, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there were a lot of girls that liked him because he was an attractive dude,
Yeah.
But
and awesome.
Yeah, and awesome, and awesome, and just amazing person.
Yeah.
And so and then that was a thing that also was
on your shelf. Another thing on your shelf.
Another thing.
Okay.
Because I felt for one, the fact that he thought that I would treat him differently or think that there was something wrong with him when he told me, that hurt me and made me sad that was his experience, that he was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
And I remember he was telling me there's this idea that people who, who are gay, that it's because they've had some abuse in the past, and that's why that they turned gay,
Right.
And he told me, my parents are amazing, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, and there's nothing wrong with, it's like, so that was kind of, that was that thing on my shelf.
Okay.
So coming back to like, married life and, so back to that, my husband and I, we were like, oh, we're 25. We better get, have a baby right away before we want to have 8 kids. We never get these, better get going. So like 3 months later, I get, I'm pregnant. And
3 months.
Yeah. But we were like, we want to have 8 kids. So we were like, yeah. But then I realized like, it's not as easy as I think, the church kind of portrays, or even in the world kind of portrays, like being a mom is hard. But, and we were actually living with his parents at the time, which was also a thing that makes it a little difficult, just because, I want to be on your own. But we were grateful because we needed, it was we needed that. My life's so weird, but we decided to build a tiny house. So we built a tiny house.
My wife is obsessed with tiny houses.
Really?
Tell our listeners what a tiny house is. Tell our listeners or viewers what a tiny house is.
Yeah, so a tiny house is a house that basically can fit on a trailer. It's usually 8.5 feet wide. They can be anywhere from like 20 to 40 feet long, 13 feet tall. And I was obsessed with them. And, I'm an artist, so I love to make stuff. And so my husband was really handy, and so I convinced him. And that's why we moved with them, because we were going to build this tiny house because we sold our apartment.
Was this when the minimalism movement was really taking off?
Yeah.
So this is a few years ago?
This was, like 2-3 years ago.
Oh, wow. So we're now up to 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So you built a tiny house.
Yeah, we built a tiny house. Yep. He'll always say I built the tiny. He built it. I was pregnant, so he built the tiny house. I designed it, and we lived in it. And
where?
And Genola, because do you know where Genola is?
No.
It's like, of course you don't. That's why we lived there, so that people wouldn't know. It's like past Santaquin. But yeah, so we lived there, and while we were living there, I actually had not my son. I didn't have my son actually in the tiny house, but I went to a birth center, had my son there, and that's when all of myself, I started to get into self-help and really, tried to personal development. All started after that.
What kind of self-help? So were you feeling broken? Were you feeling depressed? Were you feeling in need?
Yeah. So
was there some hole you were trying to fill?
Yeah, there was a hole. So man, there's so much. I forgot to mention this. Is it okay that I'm kind of going?
Yeah. What time do you need to go?
What time is it right now?
It's 12:35.
Oh, snap. Wow.
What time do you need to leave?
I'm okay. I can maybe do 40 more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I can do it.
Let's make sure and cover the faith crisis stuff.
Yeah.
And where you are now.
And this is a huge part of it. So when I was at BYU, I realized that I had a struggle with control. I was really struggling, the depression and everything that we were talking about when I was younger. And I talked to a counselor, and I realized that I actually struggled with abuse. And I don't want to go with who did the abuse or blah, blah, blah.
That you had abuse in your background.
Yeah, sexual abuse was there.
Sexual abuse.
Yes, and I didn't surface until I got married. And so then that's when that's like, even though I talked to a counselor and it came out, but then when I got married, that's when more issues were starting to come, because, I'm married, and, what do you do when you're married, Yeah. And so that's why I was kind of spiraling with a lot of things. And so, and even with things that my husband was going through, and then with things that I was going through, and I was really like, okay, I need to get some help. So I dove into like this self-help. So that's where it started. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so
super common.
And that was another reason why I became so quiet and shy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm like kind of coming full circle.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That's its own podcast.
Yeah, that's its own, and we don't have time for that right now. But so that's when I started to go to seminars and start
like Landmark, like
I don't know if I want to say which ones they are.
Okay.
That's okay.
Because keep going. Okay.
So I did seminars, and like,
were the seminars good experiences?
Yeah, they were great. It was amazing. It was amazing at one point. But so we were breaking arrows, and I was breaking boards with my beliefs, and I was learning how to change my beliefs.
This is like walk on coals kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
Tony
did
Robbins
that.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
We did all of that.
Positive living,
yes.
vision boards,
all of that. Yes.
Just to give people a sense
Thriving.
for okay.
Yeah, and it was like the best. And me and my husband were like all in it. We went to Bali. We did like all these crazy things, and our eyes were just being open to the world and, you know, the idea of the atonement and how we were able to. It was like we were able to like deal with our own.
Were they Christian-centered self-help kind of places?
Yes, but at the same time, like it was Christian-centered, but it was, if you look at the ideas of belief breakthrough, it was like we could do it on our own. It's like you didn't. It was almost like the idea of like deep down, it was like self-empowerment and didn't really need what I took from it was like, I don't really need the atonement. It was like, what's the atonement then if you're able to kind of like,
right.
You know,
if you find the power within,
yeah, exactly.
Where's the atonement in Jesus and all this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's where it all began when we started. My husband and I were, you know, starting to kind of become more Jack Mormon. You know, where we were, even when I was teaching, I was introducing some of these things I was learning, and I would get in trouble because I would tell people to see the greatness in each other. And I got in trouble for doing that in one of a class. And like, you know, we started
You can't get too powerful individually.
Yeah.
Keep that power tamped down because the you know, Jesus and the brethren and the patriarchy and the priesthood.
Exactly.
That's the power.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. And so that was going on. And then...
and if you don't need Jesus and the atonement, you don't need the church.
Right.
And if you don't need the church, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So that we can't have too much personal empowerment.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that happened. And then, we started to really dive, and we were diving into the scriptures. We're kind of becoming, you know, it was like the lesser law versus the higher law, you know, what's the higher law? We were kind of like going into that. Oh, like what did Christ do? He didn't, you know, he helped somebody on the Sabbath, you know, like what really did Christ do? We're really studying Christ. How was he? He didn't follow the rules. Like we were kind of like really focusing on Christ. Nephi, they left their church, you know, like we were kind of like seeing things differently. Like they left the church that they were at to, you know, we weren't necessarily thinking about leaving the church at this point. We were just seeing things differently.
You were becoming awakened.
Awakened. And then like
even that it's a very revolutionary act. You talk about being a Jack Mormon.
Yeah.
What you're actually talking about is arriving at your own interpretations. Yes. And meanings of the scriptures.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a radical act.
Yes, yeah, we would.
Because in Orthodox Mormonism, there's one interpretation, right. The one you've been told.
Yeah. So we would always be in the back, and people would be like, well, and we're like, that's not true. We would say that to each other in the back. And and the
church would call that becoming wise or prideful.
Right. Yeah. I guess so. Yeah.
Dangerous.
You know,
and
we'd always raise our hands and say stuff, and people were like, "What?" You know.
Yeah. Slippery slope there.
That was the start of that, and then we were struggling with finances, and you know, and then I had a business, and you know that happened, and it did really well, and had some. And then again, more financial struggles, and then tithing, and it was like, oh, you know, and that was a struggle with my husband particularly. And then my husband was struggling with some things, and it was like this idea of like, you know, you need to be, worthy, like, what's the word? Sorry, the memory. You have to be faithful to Christ more than your own husband. You know, basically the gospel. Like if someone is struggling, like if you can't take it anymore, what do you do? You know.
Okay, so if you're saying like your bishop or leaders or family members or whatever would see that your husband might not have been fully in,
or
and
something,
you're being urged to pick Jesus over your husband,
kind of thing. But then luckily I wasn't necessarily like heeding into that because of this self-help and the things that I was going through, and then my husband.
But you felt those forces.
Yeah, I did felt those forces for sure.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me
Jesus
that was like,
over your husband.
Yeah, there was a part of me that was like, but then I was like, how prideful, for me to think that I am somehow better than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes, I don't know, I feel like sometimes in the church it's like if husbands are struggling with something and the woman like is always good. I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like the women is always good. They're always
the women are the guardians of spirituality and of righteousness.
Yeah.
It starts with chastity and
when it comes
dress
to
modestly.
chastity, things like that.
Don't let him touch you. And you're the guardian of the male's worthiness.
When it comes to sexuality, I think that's more particularly, things like that.
But it flows into everything in the marriage. The woman makes sure there's scripture study.
For sure, yeah.
The woman makes sure there's family prayer.
Exactly.
The woman whips the husband in line. Because men are carnal.
Right.
Men are, unruly.
Exactly. So
which is bad for men. That messaging is bad for men and women.
For sure.
Right?
Yes.
How about we're all grown-ass adults?
Yes.
We take care of ourselves.
For sure. Yeah. So then he found the CES letter, and that's when everything.
And how long ago was that?
So this was actually like last year, like January or February.
Like a year and a half?
Yeah. A year and a half ago.
Like this calendar year.
This calendar year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you're like 9 months into this.
Yes.
Oh, that's fresh.
But the thing is like it's been building. It's been building.
Your whole life.
Yeah, my whole life. That's why it was so easy to kind of like step away, if that makes sense.
Okay. So he finds the CES letter.
So he finds CES letters and reads it, and like his whole world is shattered, because like he didn't read it to find something. It's because his friend's like, I'm leaving the church. And he's like, no. And he's like basically, I'll read it. I'm not going to leave, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm going to help my friend who's struggling. And so he reads it and he's like, holy crap, and he doesn't want to show me because he really wants to make sure that he doesn't want him to be the reason to make me want to leave. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He wants to be on his terms.
Yeah.
Which I love him for that. He's such an amazing person.
That shows a lot.
Yeah. And that's why
because so many people, and this isn't bad either, but they're like, I want to tell my, I want to,
Yeah.
And he's like, oh,
and I'm not saying people who do are bad or no, I'm just saying him personally, he just really cared about, he didn't want to rock my world. And he's like, you don't need to read it. Like, and basically, he was just like, man, like, if the church's true families can't be together, like, I want to do everything I can to just like, be a good person. And it was just it was crazy. And so I was all about him having this experience because I had my experience being Black. And so it was kind of nice, even though like he was having
you're different.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what it's like to be on the outside.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, it was weird, but even though I was like it was like, I was like all about him, like, and then, because I'm not really into facts. I'm more about, like, I am, but, like, as far as, like, if this didn't happen in that time, it wasn't something that was so, like, does that make sense? Like, reading.
It's very common and I don't mean to stereotype, but for women to be Mormons in terms of utility. Like, if the church works, if the church is useful, if the church makes me a good person, helps my marriage, helps me raise a good family, who cares about the history?
Yeah, like it made me, and the way it made me feel. Like I was all about
it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good.
Exactly.
And that's actually, and I don't want to stereotype, but people of color also, they tend to sometimes care a lot less about like polyandry. It's just like, look, there's messy history everywhere. We were freaking enslaved for centuries. I just want to, is there a people that will accept me and make me feel good?
Yeah, and I think that comes with, So
the church made you feel good. You didn't care about the truth.
The gospel.
The gospel.
Per se.
Right, not the church.
Yeah, exactly.
The gospel made you feel good.
Because the church didn't necessarily make me feel good.
Yeah. Okay? Oh, yeah.
That's how I was able to stay.
Yeah.
Is by really, because the church didn't make me feel good. So he reads that, and I'm all about him finding himself, and then I start reading it too, just to kind of know what's in there, because I'm also like, there are things that I've struggled with, and then I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh, okay, and I'm realizing, oh, like this is not just like facts, this is like things that are like really important, like this is like. These are like the book of Abraham, like these are things that I've read these books. I've like studied the footnotes. I've like been geeked out on these scriptures, like going back and like, oh my gosh. And like also, side note, when I was in the self-help, I met a lot of people who are polygamous. I became really good friends with them, and I learned their stories. And there's a lot of progressive polygamists that live in Utah, and I became really good friends with them, and I was learning their story and their experience, and that also came into all of that.
Interesting.
When I was reading everything, and I knew people who they felt like they were, doing the better thing, and that people who weren't in polygamy, who were LDS, were not called to it was just so interesting. And because it was easy for me to like accept their story and to understand it, because we're all, anyway, BYU Unity and all the things that I went through. But anyway, so
because that tolerance virus is dangerous.
Yeah. So like, but then we met with some historians because we want to know if it was true, because he saw a lot of this on the church website. There are a lot of things that he searched for was on the church website.
The gospel topics
he wasn't really
essays.
looking for anything. And then we met with some historians and they basically told it was true. And I was really grateful to one who said, like, basically, whatever you guys decide to do, be together. And he was still, and he's like, you're more important, your family and you together is more important than anything. And that's when I felt like I could give permission, because I feel like in my back of my mind, I always wanted to kind of leave, but I felt like I needed to hold true to being that strong Black Mormon, even though everything didn't really make sense for me. Like there were things that were hurting me, and it was keeping me away, like, really being close to my own family who left the church. It was like, kind of like making me, like somehow I was better than that. You know what I mean? And that's not right. I wanted to like, be one with my family and get them, because I was the weird one when my brother would listen to music and I'm like, no rated R, or like, don't listen to that.
Rap, bad words.
Yeah, exactly. Bad words, blah, blah, blah. And so, so that all just, him saying that also it began. And so,
bless that man.
Yeah.
I want to shake that man's hand.
Yeah.
So he said, choose family, choose your husband over faith.
Yeah. And he basically said, I'm here because a voice told me to, and that's my story, but that's not yours.
Oh, I want to kiss that man.
Yeah. And so,
So that was this year. Mm-hmm. And so then what happened?
So then have you seen like Tangled?
Yeah.
When she leaves the tower? That was me.
So somersaults and then
like,
sobbing.
Yeah, and then it's like crying. It's like, So I was like,
best day ever.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
I don't have to go to church, but then like I really loved the community. I would go to church just to talk to people. I loved people. Like I would go to sometimes I would go to 2 ward sessions just so I could be with people. Mm-hmm. And so I missed that community. Yeah. I missed that.
Yeah.
I missed like I would sit by like all the, the elders or the older ladies, and they'd be like my grandma, like I would just like love on the kids be on, like I was just loving the people. Mm-hmm. and I missed that, like I missed. Do. Yeah.
You did then. And
I still do miss that, because it's kind of hard to find something like that, And I miss also, it saddens me that when some people have found that I've left, that they're sad for me, and it's almost like it was weird. It was like when we left, it was like no contact. It was like even people in my ward wouldn't come over, and like I did say, hey, I don't necessarily want to visit teach right now. But then after I said that, no one came over, no one did anything, nothing. If they saw me, they would say hi, maybe, nothing. And that hurt me to my core, because I was like, I'm still a good person. I still want to, like, can we still like be together? Can we still like talk? And it was like, I felt abandoned. Mm-hmm. And I mean, unfortunately, when we moved, we were in a ward that didn't know us very well. So I get that. They didn't know me very well. Mm-hmm. Actually, when we first moved, I went to the bishop and was like, give us a calling. And then like a month later, stopped going. Mm-hmm. So I think that also like confused people, how I could be so like in and then so out.
But it is always shocking how conditional upon orthodoxy many Mormon relationships turn out to be. Yeah.
Like I'd had people I haven't heard from when they kind of saw me wearing a shirt that was like sleeveless or something, and they sent me a message like, oh, you're such a good, I wanted to reach out to make sure you're okay, and but then when I replied, they never replied back, and so it made me feel like, did you really care, or are you like, just trying to be a missionary moment, to get me to come back, or do you actually care about me, Mm-hmm. And I found since we've kind of been left, I've been able to have more love for people and more accepting for people. Like it's been amazing. So yeah. So yeah, and my husband actually has a sister who's gay and who's married, and we've always been so close with them. But like, it was really, I think, reassuring for her when we left to help her know that we really did accept her fully, And it was when we left that I think she realized that we really, like, even though we were so close, but that we really did love her and accept her and her wife and her decisions. And so, yeah.
So as you were, and let me just ask you a weird question.
Yeah.
We want to order Jimmy John's. Do you have a favorite Jimmy John's sandwich?
No.
Do you like Jimmy John's? Do you like sandwiches? Do you want us to order something
sure.
or not?
Yeah. I'm not picky.
Ham and cheese?
Turkey. There's turkey.
Okay. Chips?
Nah.
No chips?
Drink?
Cookie?
Water?
Okay.
No cookie.
Okay. All right. I'll find a way to sneakily order.
Okay.
I want you to eat before you go.
Okay.
So as you were going through your faith crisis or sometime before, there's the Brigham Young racist stuff. There's
I already knew that.
Okay. But there's also the Kimball stuff and the kind of having all that doctrine that you had dismissed and kind of minimized for so long and apologized for the church and defended from the church.
Yeah.
At some point, you would have had to have the gospel.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
That was okay.
You would have had to have this reconciliation where it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe the Book of Mormon is racist.
Yeah.
Maybe Brigham Young was racist.
Yeah.
Maybe the church, maybe the priesthood ban was bad.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I've always felt that Brigham Young was racist, and I've always felt like that was all bad. I always have. And I think what helped me through is because I learned about Jane Manning, and I learned about Elijah Abel, and I learned about all of that history, if that makes sense.
Okay, talk about that.
Yeah, so that is what kept me, because I knew there was racist past, and I never liked Brigham Young. I just kind of, I've always just felt like he was there to basically get people to get to Utah. Yeah, that was his thing. That's kind of how I was able to allow him to.
But the things
be okay
you didn't
with
like
him.
About him would have been what types of things?
That I did or didn't.
That you didn't like. What
he was racist. You know, he was.
What were the types of statements you now remember?
Well, not only what he would say about, I can't tell you word for word, but I just know that the way that he treated Black people, the way he treated women, what he would say, he was a racist man. Yeah, he had slaves. Yes.
He taught that if a white and a Black person have sex, that the only way they had to be killed with a javelin between them.
It was messed up.
The only way you can atone for having sex with a Black person would be to have your blood spilled.
Exactly.
Really, really awful.
For sure.
And the Black people were bad and dirty and satanic. And it was because in the pre-existence they were bad. And just all that journal of discourse is awful racist stuff.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think some people don't realize is that even our presidents of the United States were like that. And so I think that's why I wasn't gonna leave, because
he's a product of his time.
Yeah. It was well, I'm in the United States. I can't just leave the United States. I'm kind of used to leaders doing things like that. Does that make sense? So
totally.
So I just was he was a bad leader. So that's kind of how I took it. But when I did I was in the plays, and it was when I learned about Jane Manning, and I could relate to her for the first time.
Talk about her. Well, most of our audience have never heard that name before.
Yeah, so Jane Manning was a woman. They came across and they traveled, and she found, and I'm trying to remember how exactly it all happened, but she, her and her siblings came to the plains, and they found Joseph Smith. And first that she was, and I know I will get this wrong, so people might be correct me, and that's totally correct me if I'm wrong. She came over, and she stayed with Joseph Smith and helped them out in the house, and I guess there was some fondness between her and Joseph Smith. He treated her with kindness. And she learned, she knew about the gospel, and so she was one of the first Black women to kind of be there during the times of Joseph Smith, and she was a friend of Joseph Smith and Emma kind of, and Elijah Abel was one of the first Black men to receive the priesthood, and went on missions, and So and then eventually they tried to adopt her into their family.
Wasn't she sealed to Joseph as a servant at some point?
I think somebody tried, came back and tried to seal her to them because she tried to go to the temple. They never let her go to the temple.
She wanted to go to the temple.
Yeah.
And she's kind of held up, tell me if I'm wrong, in the Mormon African American community is this incredible example of faith.
Yeah.
Why?
Kind of like similar, well, because she was able to handle all the crap and still be there.
And that's it's not the person that fights against or objects to or stands up against.
Yeah.
The person who's made the role model is the complicit, obedient, faithful one.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's natural, but it's also a little bit like you get praise if you're quiet and subservient.
Yeah.
And devoted.
Yeah. And I'm still grateful for her example, but yeah, that was what helps me stay, because, there was this poem where I would read and a part of it says, would you rather be the master, or would you rather be the person with the whip? Because Christ, because that's what, Christ did. He was the one that, withheld all of that abuse, basically. And then in the end of the poem, it goes, God gifted us a calling. God gifted us our race. And so it's like this idea that the calling as a black person, to be like that. And that poem resonated with me because it was like, okay, to be like Christ, to love someone so much or to not love someone, but to basically not be the persecutor, but to be. Does that make sense? I'm like trying to explain it, but it was the idea that we weren't the ones abusing, and that culturally we weren't the abusers, and that somehow that was a gift to be on that side.
It's
than
kind
to be
of true.
The abuser.
It's kind of true.
Yeah.
But the function is to make you feel better about
exactly.
the culture you're in.
And I'll just say, like, somehow that poem and everything, it got me, it helped me to handle all the crap. So.
And in some ways that's beautiful.
Yeah. In some ways it is, but in some ways it's kind of messed up, So it's like, yeah.
What's messed up about it as you're looking back?
I think to just allow the abuse. Do you know what I mean?
What abuse?
To allow, so when someone says something like, oh, you're so, what do people say? Oh, you're so, not necessarily will say you're submissive or you're obedient, to say that, but it's almost condescending. But then to be like, call people out, and help educate that what you might say had, like when people would say things they were trying to be the microaggression, to be able to call that out and not just make excuses for people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a degree to which the church, the gospel, the Book of Mormon, it's all been overtly, egregiously racist.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's a God, certainly God can't be judging people based on the color of their skin. But it's everywhere. Yeah. And the church excluded people from temples and authority for so long. That's like, it's not Holocaust level bad, but like if you go like one step down from like Holocaust level bad or slavery bad, it's over a century of something really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of the whole Juneteenth, the anniversary of the priesthood ban.
Okay, so can I just give a little bit of a precursor to that? So one of the first people I interviewed on Mormon Stories was Darius Gray.
Oh, you have.
And Margaret Young. Oh. And he joined the Mormon Church as a black man before the priesthood ban, and he's been faithful ever since. Yeah. There's the Genesis group, which was this group of black saints, faithful black saints.
I know everybody who goes there. Yeah, I went in
Salt Lake.
Yeah, I went to Genesis.
So there's this whole heritage of like faithful black saints. And again, J. Manning James and Elijah Abel are kind of viewed as heroes there. And Sisters in Zion comes out of that. And talk about that whole culture, and then as it leads to the commemoration of the priesthood ban lifting, and how you make sense of all that.
Yeah, I love what I love what Sister in Zion's is doing. I love that.
Which is what? Who are they and what are they doing?
They are bringing representation, because like a lot of people don't know that there's Black people who are Mormons, and not only Mormons, but they are strong, and they help people, who see things in a different light, in my opinion. And like, I think I want to make sure that when people watch this, that this is just Marlena's story and not all Black people who were born in Utah story, because I think people are going to assume that, or at least some part of them might be like, oh, that's how everyone feels. It's not. This is just what Marlena feels. So I want to just put that out there. But so the Juneteenth, when that happened, I believe a lot of people think that the church put that on, but it wasn't.
So this was the commemoration of the what? So like the 78. So it would have been the 40th.
Yeah, I think so.
40th anniversary of the lifting of the priesthood ban.
Yeah.
And it was a huge like celebration in the conference center last year. Yeah, and as far as I know, it was brought up from there were Black members who came to the first presidency and asked if this could happen. Nice. So, and I feel like the intentions were great on their part. I think it was needed, and I was grateful for that. But I think what was frustrating is what some apostles said during that time that made people frustrated, because it downplayed some things, like trying, I don't know. What did it downplay?
It downplayed, the impact that racism, slavery, all of that had on Black members and Black people alike in a sense, and was almost trying to dismiss, like almost when they thought that apology was happening because of the priesthood ban, and it wasn't. It was like, wanting to have some kind of like them to say something, or like, to admit some wrongs, or to, and there was nothing, but yet it was almost like trying to I'm not saying that like to talk about, I don't know if he talked about 9/11 or something. But it was like the way that he was trying to relate, it just was almost dismissive to the real hurt and pain, and wasn't acknowledging or willing to talk about what the church in a way had done, in the past. And
so there wasn't the apology, there wasn't the acknowledgement of the pain.
It was like kind of dismissal. It was like it kind of dismissed in a way.
Things are great. Let's move forward.
Yeah, it was kind of like move forward. It was like, okay, yeah, this happened, but like now let's, which I understand to extent, but in order to heal, you need to look at the wound. You can't just put a Band-Aid on it, There's a lot of deep wounds that need some real looking at, so that we can actually, first off, know how to heal it, but just to acknowledge that it was there. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So for you, you went.
Yeah, I went.
And how was it? How did you experience it?
And actually when I was there, I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it. And I think because, like I said, it being in America, you're kind of used to, being Black in America, you're used to things being said, and they're like, oh, really? But you kind of like dismiss some things. But my friend who I went with was really upset. And like now looking back, I get it, And I think there was a part of me that was almost like trying to dismiss, her experience, so that, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like it was some of these things coming back, my past being in the church, and
you would have liked to see an apology and an acknowledgement.
Yeah, an acknowledgement and a like
of the racism.
Yeah, of the racism. But it wasn't really there. And I was like, oh, that was kind of a waste. Mm. Like I enjoyed the music, and I thought I felt beautiful, and it was great, and there were some really great experiences, but that was something a lot of people were craving.
Do you remember when Jonathan Streeter made the fake apology and released that? Yeah. And I don't know, we covered that at the time. Yeah. What did you make of all that?
That actually made me really upset.
Did he did that?
It did. But at the same time...
So first talk about why it made you upset.
Yeah. It made me upset because like I was sharing it, and Like
when you first,
I was like, yeah, sharing it.
You thought it was real.
Yeah, I thought it was real.
So for those who don't know, Jonathan Streeter published a web page that looked like an authentic letter with the first presidency apologizing for the church's racist past, and he published it right during the time of this anniversary, as if it were sort of like the apology that we all had been waiting for.
Yeah.
And it was designed to look authentic and real, so it swept the internet as an authentic apology. So everyone got super excited. All the liberals, I imagine many people of color were like, woohoo.
We were all.
So when you saw it, what happened?
I was excited, and it was like, yes. I posted it.
It was what you wanted. Like the text was actually what you would have loved.
I was like, yeah. But at the same time, I already knew. Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
I already knew that wasn't true. So like, does that make sense? I mean, not that I didn't know that the apology wasn't true. I knew that what they were saying in the apology was true. Does that make sense? Like, I knew that they were always in the wrong, but I just wanted them to say it.
Right.
So like, so like them acknowledging, I was like, oh, okay, great. And then a friend, and I don't mean, how to explain this. I know they didn't mean wrong, but the fact that he was white too was saying that it was wrong and it wasn't right. It just it wasn't anything against him. It was just kind of another punch in the gut of like, oh, really?
This wasn't for a white person to do.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, but I wish that they weren't more. I wish they understood how hurtful. Like if they would have approached it, or at least told me it wasn't true in a little bit more of a. Didn't realize how much this is going to hurt the Black community by for it not to be true. That who were active LDS.
Yeah.
Who were waiting for it, and it was almost like. And
you know what? Not to make this about me, but like when some of the reconciling I had to do was in my mind by 2018, church obviously isn't true. Church is obviously racist. Why would any person of color ever be a member of it or ever believe it? And of course, I had no real friends that were faithful Mormons of color. So like my privilege, but also my ignorance and my detachment, it was like, why would you have a second thought about believing Mormons of color? They kind of don't exist, except in Africa, and they're not paying attention, which is like awful on 80,000 different levels. And you represent that group, and there are many of them, right?
There is.
Yeah.
There is, and I know all of them.
And that was all 12. However.
I don't know.
Thousands.
There's more that I don't know, but I knew a lot because my family was so involved, and so
I didn't do it. Jonathan did it, but like that was done without sensitivity to real people,
for sure. And I think people even when they think how could Black people be a part of this church, how it's kind of like the idea of why do people stay in America when they're still, you know what I mean? So it's kind of
exactly.
like that. So it's like, it's a little bit bigger than just that. It's like, that's why, because there's like a lot of things that have happened there's a lot of tolerance, and even almost needs to be tolerance to even keep some people alive, as some things in the news have happened, that people, making sure that like my brother could never run outside at night and jog, in Utah, people are going to call the cops on him, But anyway, that's another thing.
Not just Utah, all over the U.S.
Oh yeah, all the U.S., but especially when there's not a lot of Black people, like when people are like, like they're going to hurt, no, he just happens to be Black and he's running. Like, anyway, that's another thing. I want to go there because I could talk forever on that. But, so yeah, that was kind of
insensitive.
Yeah. And I was grateful. There was this one member who basically was buying Black families pizzas, hearing that it wasn't true, like, I don't know. She was like, I don't know what I can do, but I'll buy you and your family pizzas. And she was buying all these Black LDS family pizzas to kind of like show some love. And I thought that was so sweet and so kind to understand what that would do, to know that learning that it wasn't true was going to be so hurtful. Even though I was upset that happened. At the same time, it helped me realize how the church wasn't going to ever apologize. And I was hoping they would.
Wow. So you were upset and it...
Yeah. And also made me realize...
think.
Yeah, because also the same thing happened when the apostles, when they were going to call a new apostle, I was like, they're going to call someone brown. Like, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And they did. I mean, they brought someone who wasn't white in, but it was...
Brazilian and someone from Hong Kong.
Right. But it wasn't... I was hoping that they would have some representation so that it was going to happen. And it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then Uchtdorf was taken off of the,
out of the first presidency.
And I was like, oh, okay. And there's a lot of things. And then, then they didn't, the new revelation that, people who, gay couples who, they're not apostate anymore and that their kids can still be baptized, right?
Yeah, the rescinding of the November 2015
and
policy.
saying it was a revelation and not apologizing.
Yeah, you saw it again.
For all of these suicides and, well, I'm like, anyway.
Yeah, you were seeing another minority group having an injustice and then a change without an apology.
Yeah.
It's like,
can we just acknowledge that people's families were hurt and people thought that they were less than because of who they were, that they thought that that the only thing they were going to do because they can't change, their orientation, that they had to kill themselves or even that they even thought that there was something wrong with them.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're a gift, that was like also things that just, it was interesting that happened at the time because it also solidified these things that me and my husband were slowly kind of like,
And see, that's its own injustice, the LGBT stuff.
It is.
But it's you seeing in others.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
It's not the same. No, I don't know what it's like to
feeling
be that,
like you don't fit in, feeling lesser.
Yeah, I'm also a minority, and I know what it's like to be a minority, that people don't understand you. So that's kind of how I can relate.
Yeah, no.
So.
Yeah, and that's important. Sometimes it's more powerful to see it in another group.
Yeah.
To understand your own experience.
Exactly. If there wasn't that, I think it would be harder for me. But to be able to, I mean, it still is hard, but to be able to also have another group that knows what it feels like, because there's not too many Black, there's not too many people who have a similar story that I do, but to have, or there's not that many Black members in general too. And to have another group that has some, can relate in some way is nice. So.
And it's also important to note that the trans community is different from the LGBT community in many ways, and they're going through their own similar journey that's actually separate from these other communities, and they deserve just as much love and respect and attention, and they're struggling just as much or more. Yeah. So, I mean, each of these communities deserves respect. Let me ask you, when the church came out with its essay on Blacks in the priesthood, how did you read it when it came out? Yeah,
I already knew about it. But the thing is, I was already educated on a lot of that.
But when it was sort of putting the blame on, that was Brigham. You know what I mean? Or that was God. God did it. Like, did you like the justification that it made? Instead of like saying, we blew it. It's like, oh, it was the mistakes of man, or it was God, but it's certainly not.
Yeah, I think it's funny. When I read things now, I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that was in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's almost like I read it with like glasses, and I didn't see that.
Okay.
Because I saw what I wanted to see.
Because I've met a lot of white Mormons who left the church over that essay. Because it's like, wait a minute, I believed for all those decades that Blacks were less valiant than pre-existence, and that was taught as doctrine. Now you're telling me it's just folklore and it's Brigham's fault?
Well, see, to me, it's like other churches taught that. So, like, that's why it didn't really, I'm like, guys, do you know that other Christians, like when I lived in Alabama in the Bible Belt, like there's still similar racist ideas. Right. So to me, I was like,
okay, so
it's not, I was like, it's not the only church that taught that. Yeah. So.
But you would like to see the church own up to its problems, apologize for its mistakes, make restitution, and not whitewash.
Yeah, I would have liked that. I mean, now that I'm out, I'm okay with them. Like, they can do what they want to do. It's fine. And I do feel like it can be good for some people. I just know it wasn't good for me. Now it's not good for me.
Right. So but it can be good for people when they're in it.
Yeah, like, I enjoyed it. And I had and it's almost like my husband said, it's like almost like he wishes he could just graduate from the church for him, and be like, we had that experience. And and like kind of move on. And so, yeah.
But oftentimes post-Mormons want to say that religion is bad for everyone, and
I don't. I think, even though, like, I know people say that there's brainwashing, but I still, even though that's true, I still honor everyone's decision and whatever they choose to do, because I hope that people will do that for me. And so, I mean, I respect people's decisions, and I mean, it's almost doing the same thing. I mean, I'm not calling anyone out really, but like, I feel like sometimes even in the church, like, we would say, like, we're the only true church. And then, I don't know, then to come out and for some people to say that you're wrong. I don't know. I just feel like there's so many stories and so many things going on that we can't always, like, we should, how do I say this? Because, like, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with everything the church is doing, but I also agree if people get to choose or make their decisions. Like, and I also don't agree with everything that other groups are doing, but I think that they get to, how boring would the world be if we're all the same? I don't think it's supposed to be that way.
Right.
So
where does that leave you now? There's a bunch of different elements I want to ask about. What's it been like to lose your faith? It
was really hard. I mean, like, I always come back to Tangled because it was very much like that. I went through a depression. I love people, and I was telling the Relief Society president to please not come over, because I knew that if they came over, it'd be easier for me to come back, just because I was wanting to have that community. And so I just told them to just leave me alone for a little bit. No one talked to me, and because I just need to, like, be by myself. And it was really hard, and I was really depressed. I was crying. I was going through grieving process. And I mean, I forgot to mention this, but my brother passed away when I was living in BYU. And so I could relate that same kind of similar grieving process that I went when I lost my brother to losing the church. And it was like this whole thing. I was like, I didn't know who I was anymore. Everything that I ever did had to do with the church. Everything. The what I ate, what I would watch, what I wore, where we would go,
how you spoke,
how many kids I was going to have, everything.
Yeah.
And I just was like, who am I? And I was mad because I felt like not only did I not who I was, I find out that there were active members doing things that were seen as bad. And there were so many people doing that. And I felt like I missed out. Like that I was trying so hard to be such a good person, and to find out that there were a lot of people who were doing all kinds of things and would, elope and get married and, have sex and then come back, and that there were still, things like that I was hearing. And I just thought, I was like, and just now hearing that, and it's just like, wow, like, I feel like I just missed out on a lot of experiences that, humans have, and I just didn't have it. Yeah. And, I felt frustrated because, like, when it came to marriage, intimacy in my marriage, it messed with some of that. And obviously, of course, with some of the abuse things, but also just learning that it's bad, and then it's good. And that doesn't do well in a marriage, and like, and just being so frustrated that, like, who would I have been? And then I would think, like, then I think at the same time, after I went through that grieving process, then it helped me see, like, that then I wouldn't have met my husband. And, there are a lot of things that I'm grateful for because of the church that shaped me into who I was. But at first I was like, who am I? Like, like, there were times, like, for instance, I would be driving, and when I was Mormon, if I were to ever, like, listen to rap or even a music, and I would stop, this is weird, but I think people need to hear this, because, like, if I would stop at a stop sign, I would turn my music down because I didn't want to be that Black person. I didn't the stereotype that Black people all listen to rap and blah, blah, blah. And then now I was trying so hard to embrace those things that I was rejecting about Black culture, you know, and I'm not saying rap is Black culture, but do you know what I mean? Like there were things that I just felt like, I don't know who I am. And here I am, like, I felt like a broken Black person. I don't know, like, yeah, it's hard to articulate because it's so weird to say, but I'm just trying to be open and honest.
Yeah.
And I know, so I don't know, and not everyone can relate to it, but that was my story. And learning to like be okay, like before I wouldn't watch certain things because Black culture, what Black people did was like, actually anything that, you know, the church favors European. So like actually anything that was like different culturally or wasn't following the commandments, you know, was bad. And for me to like reconcile that and like see like, oh, like my brother, you know, that's not bad. And like, you know, it's been hard for me.
A bunch of things you had determined as bad.
Yeah.
People, ways of speaking, culture, movies, music,
hairstyle.
All of it you had deemed as bad.
Yeah, because
dark, loathsome, whatever, unholy, unrighteous. You're like, oh my gosh. Well, what was bad is maybe good, and and some of the things that was good is actually bad.
Yes. Yeah.
And that identity that you struggled so long to forge, you lost it again. You struggled with it for so long, and then all of a sudden you're in your 20s, late 20s. Who am I?
Yeah.
Who the freak am I?
Yeah, exactly.
Like you shouldn't have to figure out who you are. Like for me, I always knew.
Yeah.
For you, you're like late 20s, early 30s, and it's like, I'm starting over.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. But the cool thing is, I think because of my whole experience, it went really fast. Because like people, like you said, you were surprised that this happened this year. It was like, I think it was just, I finally felt safe. And then I went through some grieving. And then it was like everything that I was like pushing against that I didn't like, but I just was keeping back. And I'm fully embracing my authentic self.
Yeah.
And that's so great.
Yeah.
That I'm not judging myself when I want to do this or that or this. It's like I can just breathe. And I think that's one thing I wish that anyone who's feeling that I wish that they could feel the same way. And so if anything, I really hope that anyone who's still in the church could, you know, because like I look at my mom and I'm like, she's still in it, but she is so authentically herself. She tells people off if they say on the pulpit, you know, she is very much herself. And I feel like if I could have been that, if I was more like that, then maybe I could have stayed. But I feel like for me personally, and what I want to be, this is not my path for now.
Was your mom disappointed?
Yeah, she was disappointed, but I'm so grateful. Like when I told her, she's like, you know, I am disappointed, but you know, Marlena, you do you. Like you do what you got to do. I trust you. You are a wonderful woman. You're smart. Make your own decisions. You get to do that.
That's a good mom.
Yeah.
She gets the gold star.
Yeah.
She gets the Mormon Stories gold star. Good job, Mom.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What about any of your siblings still in?
No, they all left.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how has it affected your relationship with your dad? It's
grown so much because for instance, to give you an idea, we read like the same books and almost the same reasons why he left is why I left. And I realized
Meaning what?
What was that?
So like, tell me what, so let's go, because actually this is the beginning.
Yeah. Conversations of God. Have you read that book?
Conversations with God.
That's like one of the first books. And I actually bought it.
That led him out?
That was the start of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually read it when I was still active, but I was like, oh, Conversations with God. How can I be better with, you know, like, how can I, and I kind of like left it on the shelf and then this started and I opened it. I was like, oh, this is not like a typical Christian book. Right. My dad also went to, Marianne Williamson. Yeah. So he was
kind of like self-improvement
stuff. And he did all of that.
Back then
when I thought
so he had an awakening of his own empowerment. When he left, and that caused him to leave.
All of that. And it was almost came full circle.
Well, what's that like to know you had followed a path of your dad and you didn't even know it?
It was really amazing. Like I realized like when I was like, you know, upset at him and I realized, wow, like, at first when I thought he was being so distant, but I realized he was allowing me to have my own journey.
Yeah, but to his own detriment in the sense of he allowed himself to be viewed as a problem, as fallen, so that you could have your own journey. Gold star to your dad as well. Gold star, Joe Smith.
And he didn't tell me anything until I came to him, and then he opened up and told me.
Wow. Was it ever like, Dad, why didn't you tell me? I wish I had known earlier. Like,
no,
did you ever have that?
No, I didn't have that.
Interesting.
Because I understood why he didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it is a respectful act.
Yeah, it is respectful.
And it's an act of restraint.
Yeah, for sure.
Others feel like it's their mission to have to tell their kids.
No, he was very much like respected me and what my decisions and everything. When I was Mormon, he was very respectful of my decisions always. And I think that's what I view, even when people who are still in the church. I want to do what my dad did for me.
So there's all these holes that develop after a faith crisis: identity, spirituality, morality, community, family, friendships, afterlife stuff.
Yeah.
How have you? I mean, you probably need to go soon. So how have you filled those holes? Or
the funny thing is, like, when I read the scriptures, to give you an idea, when it says, "Be still and know that I am God," I kind of viewed that even when I was in church, that we're all God. So it might be weird, but it was almost like even some of the scriptures I was able to, like, these views of, it still fit into my new idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not what typical people would say that's what that scripture means, but that's what it meant to me. And so, like, I read, like, the fourth agreement. So I, like, a more spiritual, not necessarily religious, but I was, I read the fourth agreements. What's that one? Miracles.
Book of Miracles?
Yeah. It's like something like that.
Okay.
I've been reading a lot of books, and I think it's more of that. I still believe in a higher power, for sure. But I'm also, I think the biggest thing is I'm just okay with not knowing. Before in the church, it's like, and now it's like, I'm okay with not knowing.
How can you be okay with not knowing?
I'm open. Before I was like, I know the church is true. And now I was like, I don't know. And it's okay. It's okay that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ever be in I remember being in the church and thinking I know more than other people. And now I'm not in that position anymore. I feel like it's okay to not know and to be open to new ideas. And hey, who knows, maybe one day I could go back. I don't know, could go back to church, but I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
I'm open. Yeah. I'm open to, right now, I'm just happy to be able to just embrace myself. And before I wouldn't allow myself to, I think the thing is I'm just happy to breathe. I'm just happy to breathe and let myself, like, wear a sleeveless shirt and not judge myself and let other people see me in that. And I think that is, like, I don't know, that's the start.
So the Mormons are conditioned to think wickedness never was happiness. And of course, the most wicked thing you could ever do is apostatize from the church. So a Mormon would say, how can you possibly be happier now when you've left the true church and the gospel and you don't have the certainty? Like, they're looking at you going, man, she's really fallen. Yeah.
Well, my husband, our marriage has been even better after leaving, because I feel like I fully love and accept him more than I did before, because I'm not judging him and his decisions and letting him be his own person. And, like, I feel like I'm so happy. I feel like I could be so happy because I'm embracing myself and everything. And I mean, I have moments, but, like, just to be able to respect your authentic self is so amazing. To just let me be okay with thoughts that I, maybe would have rejected. Oh, Marlene, don't think that way. But to embrace me and, like, I don't know, I have been the happiest I've ever been, because even when I was in the church, there are things I've wanted to do and I wouldn't do it because it was bad.
Right.
And it's not bad. I'm learning more. It's like the idea is more detrimental than the actual act. If that makes sense, it's like what you think of what that means, what you believe, the belief itself is more detrimental than the actual act, depending on what the reason why you're doing it.
Right.
I feel like more of the power there than actually the act itself.
Yeah.
The reason behind. Mm-hmm. So like, had we left and I still believed in the gospel, I think that would be a different story. But because we left and I have evolved, then it's different that we're out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we called wicked is actually good, and a lot of the things that we called good is actually wicked. And
yeah. You know, what you're just saying is like, I think of this. When you think of different cultures, and this is how I can relate it, and that's why the temple is, there are a lot of people that look at other cultures and they say, what they're doing is bad. But if you lived there and you were raised that way, you wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. Right.
In fact, what they saw you doing would be bad.
Right.
And so when I see it like that,
cultural relativism.
Yes, it makes sense to me. And that's why I'm like, no, that's what's going on. I don't know if I necessarily think that anything really is inherently good or bad. I feel like it's different in a way, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously there's things that I don't agree with or think is, not the best thing to do, but I do believe that, like, depending on the circumstance, I mean, like I don't know. I don't want to go into that, but yeah.
But you're happy and healthy.
Yeah, I'm happy and healthy, and like, I've tried some things, and I've realized, like, that's another thing too. It's like when you leave, you're expected to like just do all the things.
Yeah, drugs, alcohol, whatever, swinging, infidelity.
And I'm not interested, in
a lot of that stuff.
No, I'm not, and that's okay. And I think that's another thing, even on the outside, that people are surprised that I'm not, who have left, that I'm not wanting to do that too.
They kind of want you to become a debaucherous because that's in their mind what happens when you leave the church.
Yeah, but and I've tried some things and I'm not interested.
Yeah.
So
it can be that simple. Yeah, not for me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, ew.
Or you try some things and like me, it's like coffee's kind of cool.
Yeah.
For me.
I tried that and it has kind of put me to sleep. So I'm like,
interesting. Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It doesn't really. So yeah.
And then just you talked about embrace. What does it mean now? How are you making sense of what it means to be Black now? It's probably a weird question.
No, it's not.
Are you on a journey of discovering what that means?
I still am, and I think the thing is I'm just Marlena. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, yes, I'm Black, but at the same time, that doesn't define me. And I think that's kind of where I'm also going to. Yeah. It's like yes, but at the same time, it's like I'm allowing myself to have the journey I'm going to have, and it doesn't have to look like anyone else. In fact, I know that there's going to be even some Black people who had, who were raised in the church, and their stories are going to be so different, and I'm okay with that. Right. I think that is kind of where I'm going with it. It's okay that I'm, yeah.
Well, anything else you want to share with our audience before we part?
I think
any final words of wisdom or because let's just say there are. Yeah. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who connect with you because you're human.
Yeah.
But I think both of us really like the idea of the fact that you're representing a certain experience.
Yeah, for sure.
That we haven't really covered. So for anyone who's sort of in it right now, trying to make sense of who they are or their faith or whatever, and especially someone who is, someone who's Black or a person of color or another discriminated minority group, and they're kind of going through, you a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago. Any final words of wisdom for them? Yeah,
I think I'm not, like, one thing is I'm not going to tell anyone to leave.
Yeah.
And I'm great because I honestly feel someone told me to leave, I wasn't going to leave. It needs to be on my own terms.
Makes you want to stay when someone says leave.
It has to be on your own terms, and I honor anyone who still is staying, and I think it's beautiful that they're choosing that. I feel like if you're going through something similar and you're wanting to kind of leave or embrace that, I'll just say if people want to reach out to me, they can. And that
how can they get a hold of you? If some are listening, you may not want to give your email address, or do you? Or?
Yeah, I'll give my email address.
What's your email address?
Because I have like 3. So you can email me at Marlena Marlena 2003-2001 at msn.com. Don't judge it.
2003-2001
at MSN.
It's long.
Yeah, it's long.
Marlena 2003, 2001 at
MSN.com.
That's the email you're okay people reaching.
Yeah.
There are people that reach out.
Oh, really?
You will have people reach out.
Oh, really?
Almost certainly.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I just, and I want them to know I was really nervous to share this story.
Yeah.
And
you did it.
I just feel like people need to hear. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a fear that something, I don't know, but
yeah, I live with that fear every day.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, pretty much everyone who's ever done Mormon Stories is glad they did it. So
so I appreciate people listening to my story. So yeah.
Well, you are lovely.
Thank you.
And I hope to meet your husband someday. I'm sure he's awesome.
Yes.
Bethany writes, Marlena, thank you so much for sharing. Interestingly, Allison Taylor Mansfield, who I dated at BYU, she writes, hugs to both you and Marlena. John, I'm a friend from Marlena's Lindon days. Only caught the end of the Facebook Live. But I'm so happy that she's a faithful Mormon as far as I know. But she says, she's like your mom, I'm so happy that she's happy. All the best to you and your family, Marlena. Allie writes, thank you. Corinne writes, you're amazing, Marlena.
Oh, I know. So I think I recognize some of these
Corinne
names. So I wonder if I
Felkins. Anyway, Bethany Noakes. Lots of cool people. Scott writes, Marlene, what a remarkable young lady. Thank you for sharing your story. Lots of people are listening. Lots of people are grateful. And on behalf of all our Mormon Stories listeners, we're so grateful that you were courageous enough and had the integrity to want to tell your story and to share it.
Yeah.
Because every story reaches an audience that it needs to reach and tells a perspective that we need to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I leave for Seattle in like 2 days.
Yeah, you go back to Seattle. Yeah. Everything's better in Seattle.
It really is.
Except the weather.
I love Seattle. I actually love rain.
So. I know, I do too. This rain lately has been great.
Yeah, I was like, Do
you know what part of Seattle you're moving to? They're called art spaces. They're that's
artists.
right. Okay, we talked about that.
Yeah. So Mount Baker Street or something like that.
Nice. You're going to pursue your art. What if somebody wants to, is your husband an artist as well?
He's a photographer and a videographer.
So if somebody wants to follow your art or your husband's art, how do they do that?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and I never post, but I'm going to.
Okay.
It's Marlena Maries with an S. So MarlenaMaries Instagram. I also have a business called Lemaire Clothing, which is another story.
That's all right.
But,
you can plug that.
Yeah. So I make clothes for moms who are nursing and there's zippers. So yeah.
Plug that.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. What's the website?
LemaireClothing.com. LAC. Lemaire. Sorry. I'm like mom brain. Lemaire is mom in French. So LAMERE clothing.com. So all the clothes have double zippers so that you can breastfeed or pump and that's a business that I started like a year ago. And so,
super cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's on Pop Sugar Moms and Business Insider. And so, yeah.
All right. Well, please support Marlena and all her good stuff, art and business.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to all our listeners who joined us today. Great comments. Please go back and check the comments.
Okay,
you'll love them. Really grateful for everyone who shared. We had to get Marlena out on time today, so we didn't dig into your comments as much as we normally would. But thank you for sharing. Please share this on social media. All the donors that donate to the Open Stories Foundation of Mormon Stories, thank you. We couldn't do this without you. If you value this programming, we would love to have your support at mormonstories.org. You can donate, become a monthly donor, $10, $50, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. We really appreciate the support. It keeps us going. Thank you. And thanks to Cody Layton. He's our producer, audio video producer. He always does a great job. And thanks to our board at the Open Stories Foundation that keeps us on the straight and narrow path of goodness. But thanks for joining us. We'll have more great episodes in the weeks and months and years ahead. You guys take care, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody. And thanks again, Marlena.
Thanks.
All the best.
Thank you.